Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Today, I wanted to talk about a cartoon that most of you probably don't know about. Heck, I had forgotten about it until a couple weeks ago. It's called Jade Armor, and it's a brand new cartoon out of France. As best as I can tell so far, it hasn't aired in France or the US yet, but it did premiere back in October on Cartoon Network Portugal, and will supposedly air next month in the UK. So, how there's an English dub floating around online, I have no idea, but whatever. The show follows a young teen named Lanjun, or LJ for short, who inherits a suit of magical armor from her mother and must protect her home city of Bontang from the Crimson Lord, a villain who was defeated years ago by her mother sacrificing herself. She accomplishes this with the aid of Beasticons, which sounds far less Chinese and more like Transformers to be honest, who, when summoned, allow her to transform into the newest Jade Armor, which at first I thought was a dumb superhero name, but then again, Tony Stark literally named himself after the suit of iron he wore, so I guess it tracks. At first glance, the show gives off major Miraculous Ladybug vibes. It's another CG, French, partially magical girl-inspired animated show about a female Chinese teen superhero who has magical creatures helping her and purify something related to a supervillain, shards of his armor in this show. You'd almost be forgiven for believing that it was set in the same universe, but nope, it's something new. Now, obviously the show isn't a rip-off of Ladybug. It does ultimately do its own thing. While it's been a bit since I did watch Miraculous Ladybug, it was far less about her Chinese heritage and more about typical superhero stuff and her romance with Cat Noir. Jade Armor, on the other hand, is just as much about LJ's role as the new Jade Armor as it is her dealing with traditions in her own way and whether she can live up to her mother's example as a hero. In episode 1, we're introduced to LJ and the Beasticons in media res, as a shard has embedded into a clock and is rewinding time. This isn't even her first time loop, but LJ has no memory of this, and before she can bond with the mystical animals, time is rewound again. And again, and again. Quite frankly, it started to get repetitive by the second time.
How many more times must we go through this?
It is a unique way of introducing us to her character and the world, but I don't know. I think it just ends up grinding on my gears a little because of how it slows down the episode. Granted, I still did enjoy some of the scenes in between the wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey stuff, like when Lanjun meets up with her besties Theo, who we later will find out is a comedian in training, and Alicia, who is Snark incarnate, and an immense lover of boba.
Hey, is that for me?
You know I need one for each hand.
Add an extra O in there, and I'm right there with you, sister. I know it's a cartoon, and some stuff automatically requires suspension of disbelief, but I was amused how easily she accepts that the animals are talking by the second time loop. Her friend Theo has a far more realistic response to the tortoise talking than she ever did. By the way, the tortoise, Shenwu, is a literal mood throughout the show. He's belligerent, snarky, and cranky, and I love him.
This from a creature that moves slightly faster than molasses?
I am the wind. You shall see.
I feel that way about all the Beasticons, really. I'll try to talk more about them later. After enough Groundhog's Day shenanigans, LJ finally bonds and becomes the new Jade Armor, in a pretty neat transformation sequence. I'm always a sucker for those. And then we probably get one of the more cool scenes in the episode, as Bahu, the Tiger Beasticon, has to push the clock hands back to slightly rewind time whenever LJ fails to get the shard. I think this demonstrates some of the unusual solutions the characters will have to come up with in order to deal with the chaotic properties of each shard in the series. In episode 2, The Mess, LJ gets affected by a shard that causes bad luck, initially casting doubt in her mind that she can be a good Jade Armor like her mother. It allows us a small sneak peek into the character's mind and the turmoil she probably faces knowing her mother's gone. This is great, especially since her discovering her mother was a Jade Armor previously in the episode didn't lead to any serious moment or discussion at all. I know, it's a comedy action cartoon meant for kids, but the writers clearly do want to explore certain subjects based on earlier interviews, so I don't know why this wasn't one of those times. And as far as the typical bad luck plot goes, I didn't mind it, as it did allow some of those Jackie Chan influences to shine with some physical gag humor. That's one thing I really like about the writing for Lan Jun. She's a bit awkward, but genuinely funny at times. This is also the episode that introduces us to the overall villain of the show, the Crimson Lord. The villain is a bit harder to take seriously compared to something like Ladybug's Hawkmoth, if I'm being honest. He spends most of his time a liquid, carried around by his bumbling cousin Will, and despite getting his human form back every episode, is always swiftly thwarted by Jade. There's also the matter of his high-pitched voice.
Where is my body?
At first, I was disappointed by such a wimpy villain who somehow was so much a threat that the previous Jade seemingly died after he exploded. Yet Jade seems to handle him pretty well, even once disorientating him with a loud recording of herself. Real bad villain you've written there.
I was trampled. Me, the Crimson Lord.
But I actually warmed up to him as I kept watching the show. He's a bit more of a trickster-type villain, content to use the chaos his shards cause to mess with people, and it does lead to some hilarious moments. But when Jade does show up, he does eventually square up and try to kick her butt, usually being handed his own in response. I'll assume that without all his armor, he's weaker than he'd normally be. Though, as this takes us into episode 3, it brings up another point I wanted to make. When I was watching the show, I was concerned about how repetitive it seemed like it would be. 3 episodes in, and 2 of those were centered around Crimson Lord gaining and then just swiftly losing an armor shard. Given the premise of trying to stop Crimson Lord from gathering his shards to form his armor, you'd imagine it play out like Jackie Chan Adventures, where some episodes he wins a shard and sometimes he loses one. But that's not how it plays out. So far, he loses every time and goes back to being liquid. If every episode was basically that, you could see how it might get annoying to watch. Even though Ladybug had a similar premise involving the akumatized townsfolk, it still felt varied compared to the show's shards infecting random objects. Luckily, there's a bit more variety going for Jade Armor, as episode 4, Eye of the Tiger, introduces another villain, Black Tiger, as does the following episode, Rogue Beasticon, which does serve to shake things up and prevent the show from being too repetitive. Black Tiger is your typical cat burglar archetype, like Black Cat or Catwoman before her. Difference being her arcane focus and the fact she's a MILF. No, like her secret identity is LJ's classmate Pearl's own mother, which I honestly liked as a twist. Not that you can't tell immediately. It's one of those only in a cartoon moments where no one can tell they look exactly alike. The Slinky Thief is actually the first foe Jade faces and doesn't really defeat, which also sets itself apart from her encounters with Crimson Lord. Though I guess you can't liquidize a human. Not easily, anyway. We learn a fair bit about Black Tiger in her debut episode, namely that she does what she does for recognition by the thief community and to compete with her twin sister, who's also a supervillain, which I low-key found kind of funny. Like, what are the odds both sisters became villains? I'm hoping the sister comes into play before the season is over, as I think pairing the two siblings against each other while Jade has to deal with both of them could make for some great comedic bits and action scenes. That's a perfect segue into what I should talk about next. Action. Despite literally being an action cartoon, I will have to admit I'm a bit underwhelmed by Jade Armor's action sequences. I don't know how to really describe it, but the action, at least early on, just looks so off. I'm not an animator, so this might be the incorrect way to describe it, but it's as if there's no weight behind the character's movements. Plus, they're just not that satisfying to watch. Compare that to the other French action cartoon Ladybug, and it's night and day. It does improve slightly as the episodes go on, so it may have been a case of the team having to warm up or find their groove. It's a shame, though, because according to this article by Animation Magazine, the creators were inspired by Jackie Chan and kung fu movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They even choreographed with the help of a kung fu champion. So I don't know why it looks so lifeless at times. And it probably doesn't help that Jade's powers, visually at first, aren't appealing either. Like a character out of DBZ, Jade has to announce her attacks by naming a Beasticon and their ability. But it just comes off looking boring. I don't know, maybe I'm stupid for wanting it to be a little flashier. But the air attack legit looks like the level 1 version of an attack in some video game. Hey, maybe she'll level them up as the show progresses. That'd be neat. And while we're still on visuals, let's actually chat about, the show's art style. Because it did take me a little bit to get used to. It's not bad, it's just very brightly colored and a bit stiff at times, for lack of a better term. This is one reason why I kind of prefer 2D animation to 3D, at least for television. I think animators can be way more expressive on a budget with 2D than they can with 3D. Again, this is coming from someone not in the animation industry, so take that with a grain of salt. That being said, I would say it's still a nice looking show. I really love the designs for all the characters. LJ has a really cute look to her, though she joins the long tradition of giving Asian women colored hair, but I don't really mind it here. Even the background characters all have designs that pop with personality, though you'll easily be able to pick out which characters will have plot centered around them, same as Miraculous Ladybug. My one nitpick, though, goes back to the 3D style that they decided to go with for the show, and that's how LJ looks in her armor. Specifically, this 1,000-yard stare she has when she's fully armored up. It's a little off-putting, and it's not nearly as bad in the 2D promotional art for the show. Again, why not just go 2D? The big animation studios have already abandoned 2D animation. Let's not do that for TV, okay? Going back to the show's story for a moment, while I don't want to pretend this show is super original by any means, I think what helps it a lot are its characters. Some of the background side characters do get their moments to shine, and while they're not all great, Lan Jun's Beasticons are always a joy to watch. There's the aforementioned Shenwu, a cranky air tortoise, Baiyu, the earth tiger who doesn't talk for some reason, Shenlong, a water dragon, and Zushui, a firebird who somewhat reminds me of the VTuber Kiara for some reason.
Yay! Kikeriki!
They assist in mentoring Lan Jun in becoming the new Jade Armor, though it doesn't always go well. It's usually Shenwu and LJ who end up clashing, the other Beasticons being a lot more chill in general. And a lot of comedy happens involving these creatures, and I think it helps the show by a huge margin. I would tune in just to watch Shenwu complain. LJ herself is a good character as well. And yes, I did take this long to talk about the main character of the dang show. She's an almost instantly relatable, likable character. Basically an everyman, every girl archetype. She's a bit awkward at first, but it never comes off as cringe or annoying, oftentimes having humorous lines that actually made me smile. I was surprised. I think the fact her voice actor could be new to the industry, at least according to IMDb, helped lend a bit of authenticity to her voice. Though the inner monologues she has are very, very weirdly voiced.
No card. Must be from Dad?
But, I don't know, it somehow adds to the charm of the show and character. Another plus in the show's favor is the creative writing. It's no Shakespeare, obviously, but I loved seeing how Jade would tackle a new shard each episode, and I think one of the more interesting solutions was in episode 9, Lips Sealed, where a shard takes away LJ's voice and she can't summon her Beasticons. At the beginning of the show, I remember thinking about how she had to verbally summon to use their powers, and what would happen if suddenly she didn't have that. And I guess the writers were aware of this too. And because this is set in the modern age with cell phones and stuff, LJ comes up with a brilliant solution to use her phone recordings of her previous training to summon the creatures to help her. And I think that is such a cool bit of writing, in my opinion. Simple, yes, but creative. And I think that word is how I would sum up the Jade Armor show so far. Simple. It doesn't break new ground or subvert the genre, but it's still an entertaining show. There's room to improve with the animation and fight scenes. Not to mention, LJ's voice actress is new to the industry, it seems, so some of her voice acting is a little odd at times, but what's there definitely shines through. If you're a fan of Miraculous Ladybug, or maybe you used to be but got tired of how that show went downhill apparently over the years, maybe give Jade Armor a shot when it finally airs. It might be a breath of fresh air for you. And that's the review. I'm very happy to finally talk about this show, as I've had my eye on it since I first saw images of it months ago. And I was taken back when I first saw the first 10 episodes just randomly floating around online, despite not even being out here in the United States or the UK yet. But I tried to hop on it as soon as possible, and I hope I did the show justice, because I did have fun watching it. I won't pretend it's the best show I've ever seen, but I admire its heart and the writer's goal for the series. There's likely some things I didn't tackle in this first review or I forgot, but if viewers want, I would be down for reviewing more episodes as they come out, especially once it officially airs. Just let me know down in the comments. And while you're down in the comments, do consider joining my membership, as that's where you'll get early access to videos and things like that. Oh, and I have a merch store. Okay, enough advertising, time to end the video. Thanks for watching, and take care.